Welcome to the Stoic Responder Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Healy. As a special agent who spent more than 15 years conducting large-scale fraud, money laundering, and public corruption investigations, Stoic philosophy provided a mindset edge that became the foundation of my professional success. My mission today is to share those same ancient mindset lessons with you so that you can turn obstacles into opportunities and adversity into advantage. Time to muster up. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Stoic Responder Podcast. This is episode 98. Forget about the Joneses. Before I get into this, a couple of quick things. Number one, I am just getting over a sinus infection, so I'm going to try to record all my episodes today. But if I start hacking and coughing, there may end up being a delay on producing episodes this week. Like I said, I'm on the tail end of one of those, I don't know, it's one of those bugs that my kids bring home a couple of times a year and it spreads through the family. So on the backside of that, hopefully I can get through recording these episodes without hacking and coughing and losing it. But number two, the most important thing is that coming up, there's going to be a couple of weeks towards the end of the month where I do not record. We're coming up on Thanksgiving here if you're listening in the United States. And I'll be traveling. I'll be back and forth between our place in Texas and our place in Florida. And that's going to eat up some of the weekend time that I usually use to put this podcast out. Just a quick reminder, I do this just for free because I want to give as much value to people in law enforcement as possible to help them with their mindset, to help them survive the job. And that is what this podcast is all about. And so, it's not a paid gig. And so there's a couple times a year where I just want to take a break and just spend my time with family and focus on, obviously what is most important. And we're coming up in that time of year between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I will be taking a break the week of the 25th. I will put out episodes next week before I head out for Florida, but I will be taking the week of the 25th and the week of the 2nd off from recording. So you won't get any podcasts until, heading into Thanksgiving and then until December 9th. So just going to take a nice big break. And then again, at the end of December, I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to head back over to the East Coast to spend Christmas in Florida. So I will probably be taking the last 2 weeks of the year off. So that would be the week of December 23rd, the week of the 30th. As it approaches, I will again remind you guys, just to let you know, if you are an avid listener, that there's going to be a couple of breaks coming up around the holidays. So getting into today's episode, forget about the Joneses. Now, we always hear about keeping up with the Joneses, right? And we're going to get into what that's all about. So let me start you out with a quote from Marcus Aurelius that I think addresses this topic. He says, "How much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only at what he does himself to make it just and holy." All right, so we've all been there, right? Colleague shows up at the office with a new vehicle. Before long, we find ourselves mindlessly scrolling the local dealership's website for one of our own. I was doing this the other day. I grew up, those of you who knew me in high school, you remember that I drove a Ford Bronco 2, 1988 Ford Bronco 2, red over cream, beautiful, loved it. It's just, I wish I still had it. I wish I'd never gotten rid of it. Just an incredible, incredible truck. Of course, had like my Grateful Dead stickers on it, my Fish and Dave Matthews Band stickers and lacrosse stickers and all that stuff because I was, your typical high school lax bro. But where I was going with this is when they brought the Bronco back out, when Ford reintroduced the Bronco, and they didn't reintroduce the Bronco 2 because, by the way, the Bronco 2 was like the most friggin' like unsafe vehicle of all time. The thing had such a narrow wheelbase that, you just like, I don't even want to get into it. I had some close calls in that thing in my late teens, early 20s. But when they brought the Bronco back out, they reintroduced it. I was like one of those guys who was just like, I've got to have one. I've got to have one. I've got to have one. And then I started seeing them around and people were ordering them and waiting 6 or 8 months to get one or whatever. And you'd see one show up in your neighborhood and you're looking at it and you're like, oh my God, I got to have it. And I'm on the website, like building my own. And I always stop because, I'm not a car guy. I've never been really a car guy. I've never been the kind of guy who's like super concerned about what he drives. I've pretty much driven, Ford pickup trucks and then whatever my wife thinks is best for the family. That's pretty much it. And so
But for me, I was looking at that as like, this is a callback to, 30 years ago when I got my driver's license. And I want to have that feeling again of driving like the cool 4-wheel drive, impractical, makes no sense for the family vehicle. And so I would scroll and I would look. And all of that was driven by this psychological phenomenon that's known as conscious consumption. And we think of it in terms of kind of like in pop culture terms as keeping up with the Joneses. That's all it is. And it happens to all of us, from everyday Americans to billionaires. It doesn't matter if you're Elon Musk, if you're, Donald Trump, if you are, the guy who is serving lunch at the Taco Bell drive-thru. And I'm going to get into that in a second. Because there's a point I want to make about that. It doesn't matter. It happens to all of us on every end of the socioeconomic spectrum, because subconsciously humans look at those around them for confirmation of their social and economic status. It's the same thing as when a peacock fluffs his feathers. We do the same thing. We flaunt our wealth in the form of houses, of cars, of clothes, jewelry, and other material possessions. So that brand new Ford Bronco, the flashy peacock feathers, that's what I'm seeing, right? Psychologically in my head, I'm like, I want that. Not so much because my neighbor has it, but it's just like, it's the new cool thing. And it, again, for me, it's a sense of nostalgia, right? Now, I managed to hold off in doing this because I recognize what I'm doing, because if we're not careful, this animal brain thinking that we have can drive us straight into financial ruin. You buy an $80,000 Ford Bronco when you don't need it, and you got to make payments on it and pay for insurance and everything else that goes along with that. Obviously, that's the kind of stuff that you don't make a rash decision about unless you're, unless you're like, you've got no one else to think about but yourself, I suppose, and you're independently wealthy, then go nuts. But for most of us who have a family, who have bills to pay, who have a roof over our heads, we cannot let that animal brain thinking take over. We have to focus on what is necessary, not what is flashy, what is, some sort of confirmation of economic status. Getting back to the Taco Bell drive-through, my wife and I have 2 cars, and one of them is the practical kind of family vehicle, the big, SUV that we take the kids to and from school in. We drive to Florida in and back. It's kind of our daily driver. And we trade that out or upgrade every 2 to 3 years. We pretty much get the same thing. We find that a Infiniti, I think it's a QX80, whatever the big SUV is that Infiniti makes, they're reliable. They fit our family well. They do everything that we need to do. And it's not a flashy thing. It's literally probably the most popular car in our part of Texas. Like you pull into the school pickup line and like every 3rd or 4th vehicle is one of those Infiniti QX80s because they're practical. They make sense, super reliable. And, they have nice features too, right? So we've had, I think, 3 of those. We just kind of replace one every 2 to 3 years when the miles get high, and we trade it in and get another one. On the other side of the garage, my wife did kind of let, not necessarily that animal brain thinking, but she wanted and has wanted for a very long time a Lexus ES350. And it's not a sports car, but it's a sportier car, especially if you get the F Sport version of it. You get the red leather interior and all that stuff. It looks sporty. I don't drive it very often, mostly because I do most of the kid driving and pick up and drop off, and that fits better in the SUV. We can take our family places in the car. It fits all 4 of us. It's just not terribly practical for our lifestyles. It's more of a secondary car that my wife and I take on date night, or my wife takes when she has to zip around and do errands around town. Not really the primary vehicle for us. So, but she got that not out of a sense of, I need to get that because other people in my industry have fancy vehicle or have whatever. She got it because it was a thing that she had always wanted. And when she reached a certain point after years and years and years, she rewarded herself by getting the nicer interior or the slightly nicer vehicle. She'd been driving a Hyundai for years and said, it's time for me to get a new car. I'm finally going to get what I've always wanted. What's interesting to me is I was driving that car the other day and talking about the Taco Bell drive-thru. I went through the Taco Bell drive-thru because, by the way, don't make fun of me for this, Taco Bell revamped their menu a few years ago, and is one of the most macro friendly, like if you are counting calories, if you're counting protein, carbs, and fats, and keeping track of your macros, don't sleep on Taco Bell. You can do like really, really well if you are stuck eating out and you can't like get home for lunch. You got to grab something. You can get a pretty protein heavy meal at Taco Bell. Trust me on this. Check it out. They brought in a new nutritionist a few years ago and revamped their menu. It's actually really good. Anyway, I'm at the Taco Bell kind of near our house. And as I'm sitting in the car, I don't think about cars. I'm not, like I said, other than that Ford Bronco when it first came out, and I got real, salivated over it. I don't really think about cars that much. I just happened to be in the Lexus that day. And the guy at the drive-through window is looking out the window, kind of looking it up and down. I guess it's a nice looking vehicle. I don't think much about it. And he starts asking me questions about it. He's like, is that the F Sport? Is that the ES, or is that the whatever? And I didn't have any answers. I was like, yeah. Like, I didn't know, because to me, it was just a means to get where I needed to go that day. It was just a reliable piece of transportation to get me out and about to do things I needed to do on a day when I didn't want to take out the vehicle with the big engine that takes up more gas. That's all that was. But to him, he was looking at it as some sort of like, thing that not necessarily that he aspired to or whatever, but it was something that he was really interested in. For him, again, he was seeing the feathers of the peacock. Now, I have no idea what that guy makes or his background. He was like a teenager, right? He was a kid. It wasn't like, 40-year-old guy. It was like a 16-year-old kid in an after-school job. For him, that was something that he's looking at as, the keeping up with the Joneses. Like, I want to get that. That's what I want. And, we were all there when we were kids, I'm sure, where, you were more inclined to that conspicuous consumption mindset than you are now. You've probably grown out of it a little bit, but it reminded me of that. It reminds me of it when I see guys like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Richard Branson, the guy who owns Virgin, all building spaceships and trying to run rocket ships up to the moon. It doesn't matter if you are working the Taco Bell drive-through. It doesn't matter if you are a 40-something-year-old dad. It doesn't matter if you are one of the world's richest men. We all are primate brain, animal brain thinking about, I want that thing. All of us at every station in life, the teenage kid, the 40-something-year-old dad, the mega wealthy ultra billionaire, all have this same sort of psychological phenomenon playing in our minds. Elon Musk is firing rockets off into space. So is Jeff Bezos, right? And so, this is hardwired in us. And I think what Marcus is telling us when he says how much time one gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only what he does to make it just and holy, is a good reminder to ground ourselves and be aware of our proclivity to do this, to think about the Joneses, to try to keep up with the Joneses, to get dazzled by the peacock's feathers. You see, if we can avoid unnecessary preoccupation with what others are doing and with trying to keep up with that, and we can redirect that, if we can catch that when we do it, and we can redirect that focus on our own personal development, imagine the time and energy and money, quite frankly, we would be saving and better allocating towards resources that get us ahead instead of chasing the squirrel, right? Anybody who's got kids has seen the movie Up. So, you're moving along, you're chugging along, and then all of a sudden you see, so you're putting money in your savings account, you're doing what you need to do, and then all of a sudden you see something off to the right and squirrel, and your head goes that way, right? It's exactly like that. And that is what we are pre-programmed as animals to do. That is animal brain thinking, conspicuous consumption. That psychological phenomenon is 100% that. It's the same thing. I watch this every single day with my knucklehead dogs. When I feed them in the morning, they all get the same bowl. We do kind of like a raw food blend. So they get the same food in their bowl. They each get their own bowl, and I set it all down on the floor, and then I watch them fight over each other's food, never stopping to realize that what you have in your bowl is the same as the other dogs. And, so I've got to set them up on different parts of the kitchen so that they're not near each other, so they focus on their own thing. That's how I have to overcome their proclivity towards conspicuous consumption, because it doesn't matter what's in my bowl. I want what she's got. So you've got to catch that when you're doing it, because you are no different than those puppies. And like I said, it doesn't matter if you're the guy working the Taco Bell drive-thru who's 16, 17 years old. It doesn't matter if you're the 45-year-old dad. It doesn't matter if you are the mega wealthy billionaire. It doesn't matter if you are the the puppies at my house in the morning. We are all hardwired, and we have to catch that animal instinct, or it can drive us directly into financial ruin. It can drive us into never reaching our goals. And that's so it always goes that way when we focus on the external over the internal, when we worry about what others are doing and thinking instead of focusing on those things that we control. And that brings us back to kind of the foundational principle of this entire philosophy of Stoicism, which is focus on that which you control. There's the internal, there's the external. Worrying about or being thrown off base or looking into somebody else's food dish or trying to keep up with the person down the street who got the new car or launched their rocket into space, whatever it is, by avoiding unnecessary preoccupation with others and focusing on our own personal development, we can save valuable time, we can save valuable energy, we can save valuable money. Instead of getting caught up in comparison or judgment, we can invest all those resources back into self-improvement and into the pursuit of virtue, which is the whole point of this philosophy. So I thought that was an interesting topic to bring up. When I read that Marcus Aurelius quote, it made me think a whole lot about all the different times that I have let myself and my animal brain move in that direction. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me get you out of here by giving you a journal prompt. Write down this and then answer the question, why is what others are doing so important to me? You'll be embarrassed to answer, right? And I want you this week to focus on that and think about that. Think about every time you get caught up in that animal brain, conspicuous consumption, and try to catch and break it in the moment. So if you want to support this podcast, if you're enjoying the content over here and my ridiculous stories about Taco Bell drive-thrus and, billionaires and rocket ships, you can do so by picking up a copy of my book, In Valor 365 Stoic Meditations for First Responders, which is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you get your books. It's available on Kindle and Nook for instant download right now, or you can get the paperback edition, which is available as well. It's a great resource for anybody who wants to practice this philosophy daily. Again, this podcast is designed for people who are in law enforcement, who are first responders, but the reality is this is for everybody, and this book is a great resource for you if you want to practice this podcast or practice this philosophy on a daily basis. It's going to give you some quotes, some contextualization that's directly relatable to your life. It's going to give you daily journal prompts like the one I just gave you, maybe some action items to help you integrate the lessons. Then if you want to get these directly into your email inbox so you never miss an episode, go over to thestoicresponder.substack.com and subscribe for free. You'll get 4 emails a week. Anytime I write a newsletter, anytime I write Stoic leadership lessons, it's going to go directly to your email as well. I promise not to spam you. I don't send you anything but the podcast and the free newsletter. So not asking for anything over there, not asking for money, not asking for subscriptions. It's completely free because this is intended to be a resource for you. And finally, the best way you can support this podcast is get more people to listen to it. So you can like, share, and subscribe, if you would, wherever you are listening, so that others can learn about what we're doing here. Got 3 more episodes for you this week, folks. Get out there. Don't keep up with the Joneses. Forget about the Joneses. And until next time, you are out of roll.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, like, rate, and share this podcast so that we can spread the benefits of Stoicism to other first responders. It will only take you a few moments, but it can help us tremendously. Until next time, out of roll.